Hello and welcome. So excited to have today Shrungar Dadarkar on our podcast. Shrungar, welcome.
Thanks, Shiraj. Thanks for having me here.
Shrungar, I will begin with the introduction. I heard about you from some of my friends, and then I got to see that you were coming as a panelist in IGDC last year. And I still remember that we were three people coming from the art function, and we decided to come to take the front row. It was a very crowded room at IGDC on your panel about Gen AI. And I have to say, all three of us were very impressed by your responses on Gen AI. And this is a very difficult topic, right? Like it's a very sensitive
It
topic.
is, yes.
People have so many different kind of opinions, and you have to be sometimes very mindful. Also, because what's happening in the industry right now might be very different from a couple of years later. So it's
Yes.
difficult to record something and put on paper, probably. But honestly, I was very inspired by your vision. I was very impressed about it, and in my podcast, I have avoided putting Gen AI as a topic, even as a question from the previous episodes. But I really wanted to do one very specifically focused on it. And who could be a better person other than you? So, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you for having me. And I'm very excited because it's a topic that I have been dealing with and working with for almost 2 years or more than 2 years. So it makes sense, and we have matured since 2022. So I think it makes sense right now.
Right. Can I do a bit of your introduction for people who do not know
Please,
you?
please. Yeah.
All right. So Shrungar is director of generative AI at Scopely. He lives in Bangalore, in the city where I'm living in right now. And what's most interesting about Shrungar's current role is his career. Like you transitioned from an art background, like myself, for example. So you began your journey as a concept artist, starting with Dhruva, which is itself a pretty big company here. It was a big company here in India. And then you grew on to becoming an associate art director at Dhruva. Then you were an art director at GSN Games. And then you became an art director at Scopely, and then all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, we'll see, maybe you'll cover that somewhere. Then you decided to get into generative AI and became a director for it, for that technology. However, if I'm understanding this correctly, thinking more from the mindset of the needs of an artist, and maybe your application on Gen AI as your role is throughout in the organization,
Yes.
but you know about the art pipelines more than someone else, for example.
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes, it's been a very weird journey. I've always had that weird journey, and so I think I've made my parents proud by becoming an engineer right now because technically I'm an engineer. So it's a different transition, and I'm very excited to talk about how we can leverage this and how we can really be sensible about this, thoughtful about this, and then how we can see ourselves and this world in the future with this technology itself. Right? So very excited.
Got it. So first off, I would like to understand what's the reason why game dev studios are considering or increasingly using Gen AI for production or art production.
So it all depends on who is the stakeholder. Um, we have GMs, we have art directors, we have artists. So it all depends on, are we catering the business, are we catering the cadence side of it, or are we catering the style side of it? Are we exploring something new? Are we trying to have a small R&D team just to explore new styles? So it all depends on what is the problem that you're trying to tackle. That is one. But when we talk about metrics, we talk about environments, characters, props, uh, whether that is in 3D, whether that is in 2D. There are also initial tools for animation. So it all depends on what are the problems that the business or the functional lead or an artist is facing, and then they are trying to solve or trying to approach that problem with keeping Gen AI in mind, so that they have a bit more leverage or some power over solving that problem. Imagine it as an assistant for us to solve
Right.
that problem.
And would you say this, or would you agree that Gen AI tools help solve the business goals or the challenges in a more efficient way today, for example, as compared to completely not using them? Would that be a factor as well?
Um, so what we have observed is, even though Gen AI has been there for a very long time, there is there's um, a proper gradient of people who are not aware of it, and then people who are really aware of it. So the factor is that people are applying it for multiple reasons, but it all depends on who is the person. So whenever someone comes to me and talks about Gen AI, I ask them, like, okay, fine, what is your role? Based on that, I can probably serve better, or at least answer better, because it's just so many variables to consider when we talk about this.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about, because you mentioned that the end purpose of getting the content created with the Gen AI, for example, someone is developing characters, environments, style development, whatever. Um, End of the day, these are for consumers, right? This is for the players. What you are doing this stuff, and maybe every company or the background of the studio will be different on how they use this AI tool.
Yes.
And it can also be this gradient. It can be something where a small indie studio or small teams which cannot have big budgets even on the
Yes.
AI, where they can set up departments like yours
Of
with some
course.
vision, and they all they have is maybe some licenses to, I don't know, doll E or Mid Journey, and then the content is so straightforward AI, right?
Yes.
But then there can be some specific ones which might be heavily invested. They might have a proper streamlined process. They may even do their own style trainings
Yes.
internally, like with their own content and stuff like this. So the end output is not like, it is of course generated by AI, but at the same time it is driven by the knowledge and the training from the
Yes.
material that the company
Yes.
had earlier, right? So there is this gradient, which I think, if I'm saying it correctly.
Yes. Yes. It is. Yes.
Hmm. So in this case, the output is also very different. But
Yes.
let's imagine there's a middle ground studio which is strongly using AI, and the work which is out there appears AI when you look at it, or at least like we can predict. Maybe, I don't know whether a layman being able to predict, or the common consumer. Um, do you think that from this player perception, this perspective, can the audience tell, or do they even care if Gen AI was involved in creation of the asset? And does that impact the value and appeal of the game?
So we have not done a survey on this, but we might need to dive into why the players are there for. Like, there could be a boutique indie game which is specifically focusing on the beautification and the aesthetics of the game, and then there's a certain fan following for the art director or the studio itself, that they make games in a certain way. Maybe over there, the players might feel that it's a bit of injustice. Might feel. I'm not sure. But when it comes to consumers, which are free to play games, I don't think they can see that difference, that this is Gen AI, because this is heavily mixed with a lot of things. That there is gameplay, there is rewarding, there is animation overall. So it's not just the visual that we are looking at; it's the feel that players go through while playing this game, while we are trying to hit another opponent, or we are trying to match a bubble, right? So it all depends on what the player is there for. On a higher side, on a general side, I don't believe that there is a perception of AI, because for them itself is a marvel, and because it is not connected to their AI is not directly connected to their uh, their daily lives as such. I don't think there is a thought of, hey, whether it is Gen AI or not Gen AI,
I
and this is
agree.
what I think at this point, at least.
Yeah, I agree. For example, as an artist, you may be able to tell a certain kind of contrast in that image, and then you might have seen too many of AI generations, and then you might be able to kind of like guess that, there is
Yes.
some application of AI here, and then finally it has been touched upon. Just
Yes.
like, for example, maybe a very fluent writer or someone who is very
Yes.
strong with English can probably distinguish better by telling about a text written by a genuine writer from their thoughts, or was it post processed and improved and ChatGPT wrote this email kind of like thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can identify a text written by ChatGPT and written by Llama. So because we are knee deep into this, we understand. Okay, fine. This is a bit generic and bit plasticky. So this is probably a ChatGPT output, and then this is if you want a bit of a human element, you might need to go to another LLM, or you might need to take that and tweak it. So it's very, because we are so much into this, we can definitely identify. But there's a
Right.
high chance that regular people might not be able to identify.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to come down to what this whole transition in the landscape of rise of AI is for a game artist. All right, like, and let's even forget about the game aspect. Let's think about a mentality of an artist um, when they're in the school, when they're growing, they discover about the. Again, I'm talking about my days of school. Maybe things have already evolved now, but let's imagine that when you are learning and understanding about a certain craft, and then the first introduction that you kind of get is, oh, you have to practice, master, learn this and that, and those things will hopefully still remain. But the convention for most common artists is, I'm gonna keep working harder and harder, and I'll keep improving my skills, and then I'll step up with my career, with my salaries, with my stuff like this. And naturally that also informs most way of working through hands-on work, where it's like, oh,
Yes.
I'm gonna create every pixel of this, and this is how my satisfaction of doing this work is. In that case, what's your recommendation on how the industry is evolving, and do you think if artists should embrace AI in their general use case very openly, because there might be some conventional thinking around, and are there any reasons to be cautious? Of course, from business objective, it makes a lot of sense. Okay. But
Yes.
how can Gen AI generally benefit the artist? What would be the way? Let's say they are capable to do things by themselves as well. Then why should they embrace AI?
Is it okay if I tell a short story about my dad? Because my
Yeah,
dad, my
yeah, of course.
mom, my grandfather, they're all coming from the art background. And
Of course.
I'm talking about the mid 90s, where computers kind of came in. And my dad was a product uh, package designer. And then he used to have this machines where you will take photographs, and then this backlit where you'll do the alignment for any kind of designing. Um, then he used to charge a bomb just to have a gradient, and then came computers, and then came Photoshop itself, where you can just drag and drop, and then the gradient is right there. Um, so when we take that as an example, and we cannot deny technology. It's very hard when the technology is out there. It is going to be very hard for us to deny, like laptops right now itself, right? Um, and when he did that transition, um, he could take all of that, and then it's just the tool that changed, but the fundamental does not change. It does not change the way you look at aesthetics. It does not change the way you manage people. It does not change the way the what the consumer want. It's not like because you're designing right now on a light box, and then you're designing on computer, that the expectation of the consumer is going to change. That's not going to change at all, right? The fundamentals are not going to change. So the way we, and then when, let's transpose ourselves from there to right now, um, when we are using AI, there are a lot of artists in at Scopely who are using AI. They are looking at it as an extension. It's just a tool. It's just a tool as moving from a canvas to a digital tablet. What we are here for is more important. No matter what tool we use, it is not going to take the artist's perspective, which they have grown and really mentored themselves or groomed themselves into being, right. um, I was an art director in my past life, but I can still make out difference between something is good or bad. But I don't think a product manager or an engineering would be. They would say that, "Hey, this is good," but they would not know the details of it. They would not understand the players. They would not understand the sensibilities. They will not understand the demography. Um, we as artists, yes, one of the thing is that we draw, paint, create assets, or make a 3D model. But the thought that goes into building that does not change. It's just the execution, I believe, becomes faster. And with that, the way I look at it is, because the execution is faster, you might have 50,000 ideas, but because we are always working on time, because there's a delivery that we need to do, right? You can work at least, if not 50,000, at least 10,000 instead of one, and then arrive at what is the best for our players. So if you look it from that perspective, I believe that it is much more positive that we understand this technology and really dive into this, because this could really enable us than disable us. That is what we have seen, where we have seen artists who are at a junior or mid level, they're really capable of, because they were really good in ideas and they really could communicate and all, they were more empowered.
Yeah.
They are more empowered and they could really do more for themselves and also for the business. So the fundamentals remains the same. Anything that is on their mind, they can put it in front of people, and then we can pick and choose instead of just one, because we were not having time to execute the other ideas. It's a very different approach than what we were, because um, I remember when I was an artist, because let's say that I'm working on an environment and I'm spending 3 or 5 days, you become so engrossed and you fall in love with your effort rather than the output that we have created. So this technology uh, helps us look at our creation or our creativity from an objective perspective, where by which we can make a better choice or make a better decision for the consumer and what is required, rather than um, just because I've put an effort, how can this person give me this feedback, right? Example.
Right. Right. Interesting. So, I mean, this is even before getting this answer from you right now. Like having chats with you before, I can clearly see on how you have approached and embraced AI and the way you see it. Um, and I'm sure that at Scopely, for example, there might be a meaningful structure where even the artists are getting the kind of vision coming from you, and then you supporting them, you solving problems for them. But outside of Scopely, do you ever get any chance of moments where you are meeting different kind of artists, for example, and then they raise some different concerns, which are like, in other words, I would like to know what are the most common concerns that you hear from artists whenever you are navigating into your job and you are trying to deliver. Like, are the questions more around, oh, I'm worried about the job market or the job security, my career is going to be impacted, I don't know for how long we can be in this industry, or how many number of jobs will be there in the industry, for example, or people expressing very strongly on ethical concerns and like, hey, I just don't believe because end of the day this is stealing, maybe, like that can be a viewpoint as well. Or for example, I genuinely fear about losing my artistic skills. Maybe that's something someone can say. Like, I don't know. It's a very common thing, right? Like when if I'm practicing every day, then I'm having that confidence. I'm
Yes,
growing. I'm learning, and I know how to deal with challenges. But if for a long time I continue to not practice as much or not be hands-on as much, maybe I'll lose my artistic skills. So, are there
yes,
things like this which people put you into a question state and then you have to solve them?
there is, and it's all of those things. There's not one. There's all of those things, because it is understandable. So first of all, it's an alien technology, because and I can talk about artists, but it's across all the functions. Am I going to lose jobs? What am I going to? How is this tool? I don't understand this. There are also concerns that people want to try this out, but there are no tools because probably it is too expensive and then whatnot for them to really use AI. Right from, hey, I really do not feel comfortable with using this. So there are varied answers. Yeah, I've had art directors who are talking about, hey, what about the legal policies and all of that. So let me try to answer a couple of them at least, and if I do forget, do question me. So One of the things that what I try to answer, most of the artists is like, hey, can you imagine the future without this technology? That is one. It is there on our WhatsApp. It is there on our email. It is there everywhere. It is just present, and it is going to grow. So if that is the case, then that means that there is a high chance that we might need to uh, pay attention to where it is heading. We don't have to be very aggressive or not aggressive at all. We need to be a bit neutral about what is this all about, where it is heading. I genuinely feel that most of the artists are going to transition to AI, regardless of whatever anyone's opinion is. The reason being that this is a technology. It's like we having smartphones and someone is not using a phone at all and using a rotary phone. It will not work. It's a technology. It is going to be there. Regarding, let me address the whole job aspect of it. I do believe that the job profile will change. That means that um, instead of we hiring an artist for only an icon, we will hire an artist for visual design, and then they will be powered by these AI tools so that they can be accountable for a broader spectrum of visual design rather than just one, so that they can really own that, either it is a feature, it is a game, or something like that. So it makes sense for us to understand that this is, yes, going to change the expectations from us, but that expectation doesn't always lead into scale. um, Artists have always been like, right from like ages, we are expected to be a bit more intellectual, a bit more sensible about things. That would not change. So it's just the expectation of what we are doing. We might need to add a bit, a bit of breadth to what, how we think and what we deliver, purely because this is how the technology is offering us. So that is one aspect of it. Second aspect is the ethical aspect of it. So ethic is, it's, I am unable to, and I genuinely dive this into, like, one of the artists did ask me, I have ethical concerns about this. Ethical concerns are a bit more subjective, right? Like, something that is ethical for me, something that might not be ethical for you. So then how do we manage this? So I think everyone has their opinion, and everything, everyone should stand by their opinion, and it's their right. And I will 100% support anything. What we might do is also support the legality of all of this. So we have to make sure that, are we doing something illegal? Example, I think we did mention about, is there a way that I can train a model on the art that I have done, and so that I can use it, instead of taking some other artist all the art and training a model and using it and saying that it's me. So it's it's a fine line where we need to make sure that we are legally right, and ethically is something that it is very supportive of. Like, for me, 2 years back, I genuinely felt that we need to harness, as an art director, we need to harness this technology, because, and then I took it somehow on myself that if I do not do this, there's a high chance that there's a wave that is coming, and our artists, or my artists, then my teammates, would not be able to handle it. So let me dive into that, and just to understand where it is leading. Now, was it was ethical for me to do it, but was it legal? Because there was no artist, no tools, no nothing, and I was doing it. So there is, it's these questions, right? There are so many variables for us to really consider. Um, One should do whatever that person feels like, yes, but we should also consider the legal side of it. We have good, strong legal systems, and I personally trust them, and I will go through each and every document and understand. And then, if not, there's a high chance that I might not understand everything, but I'll find a person who can go and vet and then let us know whether it makes sense to us to use. So I think those are the things that I will consider. Um, then there are concerns about a tool not being present. Um, Eventually, over time, all these tools are going to be available on a web. Like, you can create art on WhatsApp. Of course, that is not game art, but you can create visuals. So at some capacity, you can just for just ideation, you can use it. Um, but I would really ask artists to at least buy one subscription of maybe Midjourney or maybe Scenario or maybe Leonardo, whichever tool that they can really test and understand what it does, because that is very important. We don't want to be like spend 2 3 years down the line and the technology goes somewhere else and we are unable to catch up to. So regardless of whatever our opinions, I think we should be open about what it is, because the world is changing. We are talking about robots right now. 2025, we are talking about robots in the army. We are talking about robots for a house work. We are talking about agents, AI as an operating system to do multiple things. So the world is changing. I think we should be thoughtful about what is happening around us, because artists, we observe a lot of things and absorb a lot of things. I think we should be very thoughtful about these things and then do as per whatever you believe, but at least be open about whatever it is.
Mhm.
I hope I answered that, because it's a very tough question to answer.
Yeah, you did. I think there's one point that probably got, or maybe you mentioned in a different way. The one about the fear for losing the artistic skills in a
Oh,
longer
yes,
go. Yeah.
yes.
What do you think about that? Or is there a certain mindset that can help you not think like this? It's like more like an artistic evolution more than how we measure ourselves on whether I am growing and getting better or I'm losing my skills.
So we can separate these into two sections. One is, um, before that, let's describe or at least define what artistic goals are. Like, are we talking about skills to draw, or are we talking about ability to generate ideas? What are we talking about? That is one. Um, where are we applying? Are we really saying that I can only be creative and artistic in the place where I'm paid for, and I cannot be artistic and creative in my personal space? Um, I think being creative and when we say artist and when we attach creativity to it, there is a spectrum and that people usually do not talk about. And this is by a clinical psychologist. So this person says, um, creativity is the amount of problems that you can solve, the number of problems you can solve, and the quality of problems that you can solve. Um, now you can be an engineer and be creative. You can be a painter and be creative. You can be whatever it is. So it all depends on how we are looking at artistic skills. So that is one. Second, let's talk about connecting artistic skills to our jobs. That means that, okay, I'm a 2D artist or I'm a 3D artist. There is no way that the things that you have learned, of course, we might need to change the education system. My father went to the same syllabus and I went to the same syllabus in my art college. So that means that we have not clearly defined, and then we are preconditioned to think that artistic skills are X, and which has not changed for like maybe 70 years, 80 years. My dad is going to turn 70 right now, and we come from the same college. So I think the way we look at artistic skills and what our contribution is, we need to relook at that and then define what the future is going to be. But even if we say that, I don't believe that my artistic skills are going to um, deprecate unless and until I'm practicing. So if I said that I was an art director or I was an artist, I whatever I do, whether it is a landscape, whether it is live sketches, whatever I do, those are things for me to be creative and then to maintain my skills and to grow my skills. That is on a very personal side. When I apply that in a job, I would not apply the same. The learnings are applied. So if we now create a division between we in a job and AI and whatnot, that is just the application side of it. The learning. So if you are consistent with trying to grow yourself into observing, looking at the world, trying to create something, this will not. I do not think that the artistic ability will deprecate. At least this is what I feel. It's a very different perspective to look from, but we need to separate these. And I've seen artists and people mixing all of this. Let's not mix the ability from what we do for livelihood, right?
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting. And something that in the beginning of your response, I kind of picked up from you when you were saying about this on how the needs will change, and then how the when you're hiring an artist, the opinion on the kind of profile will probably change as well. Could you talk a bit more about it? Like, let's say I'm going to give you the context of where I'm trying to take you. uh, let's say before AI or whatever, a common convention would be, oh, okay, I'm developing a studio. It's going to be, I have a budget for putting 5, 6 people, for example, or maybe 10 people. Then these are the kind of roles I know. There's a concept artist, there's a person who would do art direction, there's a person who will do the character designs, let's say. Someone else will be doing animation, then UI, this and that. Like, this is commonly, maybe this might still remain in this kind of like path. But I'm seeing that you mentioned a bit of these kind of overlaps,
Yes,
and then extending the ability of artists to go beyond on that, on what they can only do as specialized people on their own hands-on skill, but now evolving into being able to leverage AI to expand their brackets.
yes,
So is there something that you think that the, like, basically how can artists prepare for what should they see for the evolution of work, like in their profile, like how should they choose their track, like
yes,
individual track between all these art stream? And in that case, is there something as a personal because you have been observing this landscape, and you know how traditional game direction and development work,
yes, yes,
is there something that you think where, let's say, some roles are going to be a bit more at risk as compared to some other roles? Like, let's say rotoscopy. I mean, it
yes,
doesn't belong in the games as much. Maybe, I don't know, at least not in my mobile game development pipeline. But maybe, let's say, somewhere it's there. Maybe that work is definitely at risk, because now it's much more easier to directly
yes,
do through a computer, and you do not need people to hand tracing outlines and then they are
yes,
calculating it. In that case, roles from art director, art lead, UI artist, character designer, concept artist, like everything, animators, is there some spaces where you think that, yeah, these are more sorted, and they can have a longer lifeline, versus something which are much more at risk?
yeah. So let's talk about what could be the expectation, and then we can talk about the existing technology like 3D. When 3D came in, the portfolio was with 3D models, and how they achieved it, like the topology. What is, how many details can you add, and is there a low poly version of it, and all of that. So uh, the same way any technology comes in, and then people create portfolio for it. An artist, whoever the artist is, whoever wants to transition to this, will need to create that. So that is one. When we talk about AI, and I'll purely initially talk about what could be the expectation of an AI artist. A lot of jobs, especially on the 2D front, and even from the 3D front, I don't believe that they are going to be affected. Reason being that this is just an evolution of this. This is nothing that is getting disrupted. Um, you will still need a 2D artist to finish it. You'll still need a 3D artist to, even if there is a 3D AI generated tool, you'll still need a 3D artist. It cannot be done 100%. So um, most of these jobs are sorted in the future. What could come down to is, like any other, whoever has been a manager or leader, there is always a bell curve, and there are always going to be great performers, good performance, and low performance. So there's a high chance that more than this tool affecting a skill, it might affect the low performers. Uh, regardless of you using AI or not. And and it is the same even right now. You leave AI from the equation. Every yearly we will have reviews, and then we'll have people who are really good artists, and youngsters who are really doing good. Some people are not meeting the quality, regardless of AI. Not. I think it's the same application. It's just the tool that is changing. So I I do not see at this point whether it is on the animation side. Animation will still take time, but whether it is on the animation side, whether it is on 2D art generation, whether it's on 3D, it will change. The application will change because now you can get 3D look in by using AI, just by doing 3D. The application, and there will be cross sharing of things or artist or expectation. There, of course, there is going to be some kind of shuffle that is going to be on the JD side. What is the expectation from the artist? But the skills and the abilities will not change. I don't see anything right now. Performance. If someone is a low performer, uh, they will get affected because I would rather have a high performer powered by AI or a mid performer powered by AI rather than a low performer, because uh, that's always going to be the case, right? So not many people have thought about it. We always talk about, hey, these jobs are going to be relevant and these jobs are not going to be relevant. But I don't think it's about the job. It's about now the average has shifted. Suddenly, a person who was really great at creating landscape using poster colors, and then that goes into matte painting. Uh, if 2 out of 5 were great at it, with digital painting, because of Control Z and layers, 5 out of like are better. So it's the average quality and the average expectation that is shifting, but it is still on the performance of the individual that matters. At least that is how I will look at it. It's, again, right, these questions are so new. These questions are, and this topic is so um, broad. It's very hard for me to answer exactly like this. But I hope I'm answering in such a way that it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does, it does. I would, I mean, because you already mentioned, and I agree. I think everything is going to be tied up with the performance. It cannot be entirely, and it has never been driven by the way you did things. I mean, things evolve. Earlier, you were writing with a calligraphy brush on paper, and then now you're doing with the typography and fonts and stuff. Um, how would how would at this transition phase where it's so blurry and not the entire world has completely got absorbed into AI, let's say, how should a game artist cater to this approach of getting hired by reflecting upon their AI influence in, I mean, okay, so I think it can be very subjective. It depends on which place you are going to, which kind of art director or hiring managers or recruiters or the company policy on this AI is right now in this transition
Yes,
phase.
yes,
So, and every art director can be very different. Someone can be completely against it, like, I don't care, I don't want those kind of people who do not know how to draw by themselves should be joining my team. Somewhere else can be, oh, I'm seeing the potential future. This is the way to go things, and I'm looking for those people who are able to with proud and with rightfully use this AI and achieve
yes,
result and
yes,
meet the business goals. So there can be all this kind of gradient here, right? But in general case, people don't know. They are looking for jobs. They are putting up their portfolio, let's say on ArtStation, for example, and they are going to send multiple emails elsewhere.
yes,
At this phase, how are these even art communities going to evolve? And the internal question about, should I put some half used AI generated work into my portfolio, or will it come across as a negative thing for my candidature? And that can be risky. Like, what are people thinking about this? Are they worried about this thing?
in my periphery, a lot of people are hiring for AI artists.
Hmm.
And the expectation is that you understand what models, basic, you understand what models are, you understand if you have used AI tools. You can maneuver yourself to try to solve a problem in a very different way. And the existence of the problem could be for multiple reasons, right? It could be a product requirement, it could be something for exploration or whatever it is. I don't believe every people should shy away from using AI in their portfolio. But what we can do is have a clear division. Like, hey, this is my personal work. This is done purely manual, and this is my portfolio using AI. This is something that I created as a sketch, and then I have enhanced it using AI. This is the approach. This was my thought. And after all this, you are just displaying your tool hand handling the tool skills. The ideas are still going to be different. The way you will define a character and all is still going to be the same. The way you will do as an artist, AI will just help you reach there faster. So, in your portfolio, if you can have clear your personal work, your ability to do um, traditional work, we cannot call it traditional, it's digital work, uh, uh, and you understand how to use the tool and you can enhance it. Let's say that you have a style, your personal style, design a character, whatever you have done, and then you can transform that you have manually done into different style using AI. I think that's a fantastic way to look at things, right? Because that is giving the whole spectrum of your capabilities and skills to the hiring manager. Like, that person will also could hire you for pure um, digital painting skills, uh, basic fundamentals, and for technical skills for using AI. So I think at this point, at this junction, having that breadth in your portfolio is going to be very beneficial, because we are hiring for AI artists, and not just me. I have people and hiring managers in around me who are hiring for AI, whether it is artists, whether it is engineer, whether it is in finance, in business operations. I have seen a prefix or a suffix of AI being added over there. So
Yeah.
for an artist, I think uh, take advantage, try to showcase how you can enhance your current abilities using AI. That's going to be perfect, because it takes a lot of time for newcomers to deliver to quality. And we have known, like, that year one or year two, uh, you're not able to, you're not going to be able to compete with the seniors or the principal artists. But if you can, at whatever level you are, you can take advantage of this tool and then showcase that, hey, I can be of relevance and I can really contribute to this product, or X product, whatever, wherever they're applying. I think that is what we want, right? As a hiring manager, I want a person to solve a problem. Um, I would not care how you're solving it, unless and until you have you have the tools that are legal, uh, and you're not copying. Like, even if, let's remove the AI front. If I'm hiring an artist, and if that artist is going to copy someone else's work and do it, I'm not going to accept it either ways. So
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
very important for us to have a breadth in our portfolio at this point.
Yeah. 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 I agree. I think overall for hiring managers, as they see through this transition, or even before, right? I think most people will primarily care about how you're solving problems, or how you're going to meet the business goals, or how you're going to provide solutions which will be right for the operation, as well as also for the players who are going to experience your content. So naturally, those who have smartly curated their portfolio which addresses this, versus someone whose feed would be, I don't know, some lions flying in the sky with some unicorn horns and some gradients on the background, which
Maybe
are
not to work.
just purely mid-journey generations without any thought or without any objective. That will clearly appear to a hiring manager that, yeah, this, I don't need this. I mean, this text can be written by anyone. That's not solving anything for me.
Yes.
And I think that will probably be the criteria to classify whether, if someone comes on board, like, even, I don't know, some companies go for art test. The art test will still pose a challenge, a problem, and then the art directors or hiring manager will be curious that, oh, okay, I let them use the tool, but let's see what the output is and how was their thinking process, the thoughts, and how they accomplish something. And yeah,
There are two things. It's always good that you create something based off yourself and then you showcase your enhancing. Because why is a hiring manager hiring for? One is the skill, and the second is the attitude. And if the skill is showcased in this fashion, then we can assess them with the attitude of, okay, man, does this person has potential to solve this problem? Can I fit this person in that team or in that project? Because that is how we hire. We are not have we are hiring people, uh, their ability to solve problems and their mindset to grow. So these are just portfolios for us to assess whether this person is legit for us to hire or not. So I hope that made sense.
it does. It does. As a closing question and final thoughts, I would like to know if you have come across more examples or practical examples where someone's portfolio, what they particularly did, stood out.
So at this point, it is very hard for us to have. I don't think we have dived into that yet at this point. A year down the line, 2 years down the line, that is where we'll really see a broad spectrum. But something that I would like a like an input from my side, like what we should do. First step for us to explore it. Take all of our art, all the art that you want, whether you have done icons, whether you've done characters, environments, or all together. Train a model. So if you do not want to use AI, don't use AI. But at least try to train one model. It is very easy. Go to any of these websites. They have free tokens. Take 20 images, tag them, train them, start using them, and then we can talk about if there are, how can we develop further? Does it make sense to you? I think that's a very good platform for us to talk about, because then it is not someone else's work that you're using, it's your work that you're using. And that's a different rush altogether, because I've seen, and I came out of art direction by then, and I wanted to be an art director then. Like, I think it's better that I stay in creative, because this is way fun than what I was doing before.
Right. Thank you so much, Shringar. This was very helpful. And I'm definitely going to link you up in the description so people can connect with you. But so looking forward, maybe every year or a couple of years, things are going to change and we may need a fresh conversation about where we stand right now.
Yeah, and I think next year we might have a different discussion altogether about this, which has to do nothing with whatever we have spoken about. But that's the fun part about it, right? It's just fun. And thank you, Shiraj, for having me. This has been a delight. Yeah,
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Have a good day. Bye.
thank you.